Welcome everybody. This is the first webinar of the ClairCity project, Engaging Citizens on Air Quality and Climate Change. We are very excited by this possibility to share our experiences close to the end of the 4 years Horizon 2020 Research and Innovation Project. Setting the stage, I am the moderator, expert of environment and health, and we have a distinguished speaker today from University of West of England, Bristol, Laura Fokroches and Margarida Sardo, and also from University of West Department Andy King, Peter Stoppinger from the Regional Environmental Center, and Miriam Frederiksen from Norwegian Air Quality Research Institute. So what is the webinar about? And this is the topics what we are going to discuss, the types of engagement in the project and learning about the project. Very special innovative tools, ID-based, we developed, so we can learn about these tools and evaluation. Of course, you will have possibility for questions and answers via the chat mode. The success stories, innovative tools via success stories will be presented, and how to adapt the resources by other cities, regions, institutes, exciting question close to the end. And you will have the opportunity to pose questions again via the chat box. So we expect around 200 participants. Of course, we cannot discuss 200 questions, but a few very most estimates we will. It's important to know what we will learn today. So the introduction tries to explain you, first of all, about the ClairCity project. It is the primary goal of this webinar. 4 years experiences, a lot of stuff we have and valuable outcomes. Try to put the most interesting ones for you to learn. Very special tools, ClairCity tools we call related to air quality, carbon emission, as impact to learn about. Citizens are in the middle, they are in the center. They stepped in all stages of the project, and we worked with the citizens and tried to empower them in different ages, school children and old people as well, besides adults, to understand the topic, the very complex issue what we have around us, and challenge them now and towards the future to see the challenges and opportunities today and in the future. To work with us, it is very important in the project. What can you learn today? Of course, success stories will be presented, very impressive stories. You can learn about that, the ClairCity game, the GreenAnt app, and the school competition, web-based online tool for young people. Who will be the speakers, very distinguished expert on innovation, research, evaluation, and communication. It's what is important. We worked with different age groups of the society, so they are experts on this field also. Now, we come to the first topic, engagement process of the ClairCity. So I asked Laura Fokroches to present this interesting topic.
Hello and welcome everyone. So thank you. And so to introduce the ways that we engage the citizens in the project. So firstly, we had 6 pilot cities and regions across Europe. We had the Amsterdam in the Netherlands, the Aveiro region in Portugal, Bristol in the UK, Ljubljana in Slovenia, and the Liguria region in Italy, and Sosnowiec in Poland. And the way we thought about air pollution, so most air pollution monitoring tends to take a technological approach to air quality and health. So for instance, we might look at the vehicles, the types of fuel they have, which industries produce the pollution, where this happens in the city, and possibly who is affected. But ClairCity wanted to take a new approach to joining with the social sciences to look more deeply at who is causing the problems and why we're choosing to use those technologies and industries. So, for instance, we examined why do people travel in cars, where they're going and when. And this first slide shows us a major surprise we had in Bristol, when against all perceived wisdom that it's usually commuters or perhaps even school-run drivers who are causing pollution, we found that in Bristol it was leisure travel that produces the most nitrogen dioxide over the year. And that's because people are going to sporting events or to the cinema to meet friends, to go and do social activities. And overall, that produces the most pollution for us. And when you look at it with that approach, it gives a whole new way of communicating with people and exploring how we can change our behaviours to reduce pollution. So overall, our aim was to create a major shift in public understanding towards the causes of poor air quality. And we were inviting citizens to give their opinions on air pollution and carbon reduction to shape our cities of the future. So we aim to put citizens' behaviour and activities at the heart of policy making, to develop new ways of modelling and showing this. Now, we will talk about some of those ways of modelling this session, but we actually have a webinar next week where if you're interested in the ways our models came about, that is the session for you. And we wanted to raise awareness of these environmental challenges and their solutions as well. So to that, we created a raft of infographics, resources, social media slides and so on, which are all available on our website, and we want you to download them and use them for your own projects. The whole point of this project was to raise awareness of air pollution and carbon emissions, and hopefully you can go on to do that with us. We're assuming the people who are in this webinar today already have quite a good knowledge of air pollution and carbon emissions, but just to reiterate, it's the cause of 1 in 8 premature deaths worldwide. It disproportionately harms the children and the elderly. It causes respiratory diseases, but it's also directly linked to exacerbating other conditions such as cancer, heart conditions, some brain conditions as well. And climate change, of course, as well. So the same activities that are polluting our air are also producing carbon emissions, which, as we know, is the major cause of climate change. So reducing these emissions in cities is critical if we want to achieve net zero and reduce climate risks. So what was our process? Well, firstly, we looked at what's happening in the city right now, so the benchmarking, which for us was in 2016. So we worked out where are people going, what's being emitted where, created lots of maps, lovely models. As I say, please do tune in next week to find out more. Then we went through and we started engaging with citizens as well, which is what we will discuss today. And the citizens' ideas for the city included banning polluting vehicles, more cycling and walking routes, support for poorer citizens. And once we had all these ideas collated, we then checked them with city experts through our policy workshops. So this was to see kind of how feasible they might be, how quickly these things could happen in cities. And they were then quantified and modelled in impact assessments so that we had future assessments of what these scenarios might bring in the future. And that led to graphs like this for Bristol, which shows that through the citizens' ideas for a unified policy scenario, you can see emissions dramatically dropping over the years compared to business as usual, the BOW scenario. So interestingly, BOW will drop anyway, we hope, because of the current policies that are in place in all our countries. But if we include the citizens' ideas, they drop a lot faster, which I hope gives you hope for involving citizens with your work as well. And all these policy packages for our 6 partner cities are all available online, and you can find out more about these ideas in our policy webinar, which is in 2 weeks' time, where we will discuss what it was like for the policymakers to include citizens' ideas in these work. So to describe our engagement methods, so we aim to reach a broad variety of citizens from young to old, and we were aiming to both generally raise awareness but also actually involve citizens in developing our policy packages as well. So for public awareness, we ran city events and festivals. We went to established festivals, we held our own events, This was obviously in pre-COVID-19 times. We developed a GreenAnt app, which people could use on their own, on their phones, to track the air pollution emissions and where they were going. We organised school lessons and activities, and we made videos involving older people as well. And to co-create our future scenarios, we used what we call the Delphi method, which involves surveys and workshops to ratify the ideas together. We also then brought together experts and stakeholders from different industries, so mutual learning workshops, bringing those together, and a new Skylines game as well, which you'll hear more about in this session. And we over-exceeded our aims. We aimed to reach at least 50,000 citizens and to raise awareness as much as we could. Social media and our website proved the best ways to reach many people, with nearly 34,000 website views. However, we also had to work hard to make sure that our engagement methods allowed us to target people who might not necessarily engage with materials on air pollution and carbon emissions, so the usual suspects, as we often call them. So you can see that we reached nearly 5,000 citizens by directly engaging them in our Delphi surveys and workshops. So we're going to talk more about these engagement methods today, but before we go any further, we wanted to see which tools you are used to, so which tools you have most often used to engage citizens. The poll is on your screen, I think, now. So if you could click which one you're most used to, we can get an idea of kind of what we're all using across the world, if you are, to engage citizens. It's slowly ticking up there now. So schools activities, so that's actually my background. I mainly do a lot of work with schools in Bristol in the UK, because it's a fantastic way to educate and raise awareness, to reach the citizens of tomorrow. But I think we're all realising that with the warnings from the International Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, that we can't wait for our school children to take action. That could be in 40 years' time when those effects are felt. So we need to find other ways of engaging citizens right now. So as I look here, the next most popular method is workshops. So that for us is also very successful. And we'll hear more about that now.
I'm Margarita, and within ClairCity, I'm the project evaluators. And today I will share some of our evaluation findings with you. So evaluation is always good practice within any project, but especially so in a project as large as ClairCity. For ClairCity, evaluation was the means to assess whether or not the project was meeting the objective of raising awareness of air pollution, carbon emissions, and health. But what else did we want to find out with our evaluation? Well, we wanted to find out who we were engaging with. Who was our audience? What's their age? Where do they come from? We also, as I mentioned, want to know how well the project was raising awareness of air pollution, carbon emissions, and health. We also wanted to find out if the participants were planning on doing anything different as a result of taking part in ClairCity activities. And finally, we wanted to look for differences. Are there any differences across the different countries, across different ages and engagement tools? So how did we ask these evaluation questions? Well, with such a large-scale project and 6 different languages across our cities and regions, using online and paper questionnaires proved a reliable and less costly approach. It's worth highlighting that we didn't have dedicated staff within all cities that was trained in evaluations, in doing evaluation. So we had to choose methods that were suitable to be used consistently across the 6 cities and regions. So this is something to bear in mind if you're planning on doing large-scale evaluations. On top of understanding our audience, we were also very interested in exploring what the ClairCity staff had to say about the project. So we ran in-depth interviews with ClairCity staff across all our cities and regions, where we explore what were the highlights, the challenges, and the barriers when engaging citizens with air quality. We were also interested in learning if our ClairCity staff learned anything from engaging with the public. So let's start exploring some of our evaluation findings. On this slide here, we can see the engagement reached aligned with our original targets. We did really well. And as Laura mentioned, in total, over 818,000 citizens got involved in some way. Of those, over 8,000 people were directly engaged, which is way over our initial target. So here we can see the engagement reach across tools and cities. As we can see, some tools were extremely successful in engaging large numbers of people, like the Delphi process and the game. Social media and online presence, as Laura mentioned, was an excellent way of engaging with people, and it was very important within ClairCity. Each city and region was free to use which platform was most relevant to them, which allowed them to target interactions and raise awareness with local citizens. So let's now start looking at the evaluation demographics. So of all our participants, 855 took part in evaluation process across the 7 activities. So this is the Delphi, the app, the game, the stakeholder workshops, the policy workshops, the school competition, and the community videos. So these 855 people are the equivalent to 10% of the total participants, which is an average return rate for similar activities. Oh, sorry, wrong slide. So in terms of age, the most popular age category was 16 to 24 years old. This was 25% of our participants, and this is mostly due to high participation in the game. However, overall, all age categories are quite well represented due to the diversity of our activities. For instance, the workshop activities, the Delphi, the policy workshop, and the stakeholder workshop, acted 66% of 45 to 54 years old. What about gender? So most activities were fairly evenly split between male and female participants, the exception being the stakeholder workshop and the game. But in total, 38% of our participants were female and 62% of our participants were male. The high level of male gamers has meant that the overall evaluation sex ratio is skewed towards men. So as Laura mentioned, we try to target those that are usually not engaged in activities such as ClairCity activities. So we target our surveys and workshops to improve representative from poor neighborhoods in all cities. The issue is, in many countries in Europe, they don't like to record ethnicity, so we only did this where it was appropriate. In the UK, for instance, we achieve a population representative in our Delphi surveys. We had 82% of our sampling were white people, compared to 85% of the Bristol population. However, we have to say that workshops tended to attract white, educated, and older people. So this is something to consider when using this method. Let's look at the enjoyment now, and let's start by enjoyment by activity. So participants were asked if they enjoy an activity, and the mean value for this was 3.7 out of 5, which indicates a high level of enjoyment. The activities which achieved the highest enjoyment scores were the Delphi workshops and the videos, with 91% and 90% of participants either enjoying or really enjoying these activities. On the other hand, the GreenAnt app was the least liked by its participants, with 53% indicating that they disliked it. There were no statistically significant differences in the enjoyment levels between men and women. However, there were highly statistically significant differences between how different age groups enjoyed engaging with ClairCity activities. A key finding has been that the younger the participants, the more likely they were to say that they enjoy the activity. Participants in some of our events were asked if their understanding of air pollution, carbon emission, and health impacts had changed after participating in our activities. For this, the mean score was 3.4 out of 5, which indicates their knowledge largely stayed the same. Again, the large number of game participants that rated their understanding as staying the same, which was 45% of game participants, explains this result. The Delphi was rated the most highly for improving understanding, with 62% of participants saying that they now understand more about air quality. Statistical analysis found correlation between enjoyment and understanding. So the more participants enjoyed an activity, the more they reported that their understanding of air quality had improved. Finally, participants were also asked if they were planning on doing anything different to improve air quality after participating in our activities. And overall, 74% said that they would. The stakeholder workshop and the game had the most impact on participants, with 79% and 80% saying, yes, I'm planning on doing something different now. So in summary, ClairCity activities had an impact on behavior, with overall 74% of participants saying that they would now make a change to their lives in order to improve air quality. In this slide, you can see a brief summary of our evaluation results. We have found some interesting statistically significant relationships. So as I said, the more participants enjoyed the activity, the more they reported that their understanding had improved. Likewise, the more participants reported that their understanding had improved, the more they reported that they were willing to change their behavior. Younger people and those with lower education to start with were more likely to say that they would change their behavior. We also had some very interesting findings coming out of our ClairCity interviews with ClairCity staff. So most staff found engaging with activities challenging, mostly due to the fact that they had no experience in doing public engagement, but also highly rewarding. This was a rich experience in terms of learning, with our staff reporting to have learned how to pitch their ideas, how to talk to citizens, and how important it is to listen to people as well. So this evaluation shows the importance of design engagement activities which appeal to a wide variety of audiences to ensure that a broad cross-section of society can participate in engagement with policy making. So the more enjoyable the activities are, the more people gain understanding about the issues, and the more likely people are to want to make changes to their behaviors, which will eventually lead to improvement of health in our cities. We really hope that this evaluation proves useful to other researchers and policymakers working towards a future with clean air. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Received a few questions to Laura and Margarita. So this engagement process, citizens in the middle, and working with us in social science and trying to bring some outcomes to policymakers is very interesting. And also we have questions related to that. So when we have the list of proposals for the future from the citizens, how is it possible to be closer to the policymakers, a kind of bigger pressure on that? It is the first question. And the other one, what is the most successful, how to engage more successfully citizens? So very practical tips. Audience ask about that. And also asking about participants, if the community, we have rich and poor community in the society, is coming from UK, this question, how to contact them, to the variety of people in one city, in one region, how to contact them. So I ask Laura and Margarita to reply for this question.
Thank you, Eva. So I just noted a question as well, which is to describe further the game and the Delphi workshop. So the game, we will be describing exactly what that involved in the next section of this webinar. The Delphi was a series of surveys and workshops. So that's traditional surveys and traditional workshops, basically, that we put in series. So that I think is the key, one of the key things that we found for engaging hard to reach, as I've seen on the questions, or also more deprived areas of the city as well. So it's easier for researchers to put these things online and to hold them in the city centre or somewhere that's kind of good for us, like a university or something. But that was a key finding, that if you want to have more diverse people coming to these sorts of things like a survey or workshop, you have to work harder than that and take these items out to them. So for our survey, we turned that from an online survey into a physical paper survey. And then we physically went to the areas of the city in Bristol, but we across all our partner cities as well, went to those areas, physically stood there. So we either did kind of doorstepping, which is you stand on a corner and just try and ask people questions, or more successfully was going to partner events that were already being held in those cities. So in Poland, it was church services because everyone goes there. In Bristol, it was community events or community centres and health centres and so on. So we went there. This is a key issue, though, for COVID-19 times, that we found you had to physically go and physically talk to people to build trust and be present. So what does that mean for all our online engagements at the moment? I don't know. I think we're all learning. Hopefully we can physically be present again in the future, and that would be my key contact. The other would be to build relationships with the communities. So work services, groups, community centres that are already there, and hand over control, if you like, to them. So hand over your survey, workshop, instruments, whatever, to them to work with their communities, because they already have that trust and relationship there. And that would apply to all hard to reach groups. So for us, that would be low socioeconomic status, in Britain with ethnicity, so thinking about minority ethnic groups as well, so that you have that trust on their side. The power is on their side, so that they have control. That would be my answer to that question. Any others from there?
I just would like to add something. So within ClairCity, each city had a city body, and I think that worked really well in being able to reach stakeholders and communities that we wouldn't otherwise. So working with, as Laura was saying, working with local partners that are gatekeepers, that know the local people, that know the community groups, was crucial for ClairCity to be able to engage with a broad range of audiences.
Thank you very much. We could go to the next part of the webinar.
Eva, could I just answer a question that
Yes,
I've seen on the side? So it was about, I'll quickly answer. So our project was about raising awareness of air pollution and carbon emissions, and we weren't looking at actual behaviour change. So that's one of the questions. We did not measure that because it would involve following up the citizens and kind of observing them. That wasn't part of our project. We looked at self-intentions, so how much they said that they now know more about the air pollution, how much they said they understood, how much they said they would change their behaviour. And you can see from the results, mostly people were quite honest. So if they felt they'd not learned something, they said that. And if they said they weren't going to change their behaviour, they said that. So I think that's interesting for us that people talk about that. Another point was about facts. So we have lots of infographics with the facts released there. There's also many campaigns across Europe, so Global Action Plan, many others as well have got these facts there. But I think one of the findings, and that's what we're going to look at in the next 2 webinars coming up, is that just necessarily presenting the facts doesn't make the change. It has to be about enabling people to make those changes, to make it easy in people's lives, and that's what we'll be discussing in our future webinars. And another point was the citizens saying how can they influence policymakers. We're currently organising a 4th webinar where that's what we will be discussing. What tips can the citizens get to work with policymakers? So all upcoming. Thank you.
Thank you, Laura. it was very important explanation, I think, to understand the process and also the result, how we can bring further on and more on the third webinar we can learn. I suggest to jump to the success stories. We will learn 3 success stories. First, Peter Suppinger will talk about the schools, how we engage the children and what kind of interesting online tools we could use. Please.
Yes, thank you, Eva, and welcome everybody. As Eva mentioned, I will talk about the My City, My School, My Home activity within the project. And this activity was targeting the future generation, as within the project we think that it's very important to engage the children. So the main target audience was the school children aged between 12 and 16. And the goal was to engage these children to act on clean air, carbon emissions, and health related issues as well. The educational tool was more about to get children thinking and learning about the topic. So it was not to ask them to create any scientific results. It's just really about to get them thinking on the topic. For the activity, we used a tool which was called ClairCity's Interactive Cityscape, and this was developed within the project. It's an online surface, basically a software, which was used by school teams in the activity. And within the software, the children first collected environmental and health data about the city, about the school, and even about their home environment. And then the collected data was inserted into this online surface through a questionnaire. And based on that, the software created a draft current cityscape. That's what you can see here on the slide. And after that, the software showed potential measures for the children, for the teams. And these measures were to make progress towards a cleaner air and a healthier city by 2030 and 2050. The teams could select from the measures. Altogether, we had 30 measures suggested by the software, and they could select the ones they were agreeing with and they were approving, and the others could be rejected by them. And based on the mix of measures, the software created the cityscape for the future for 2 time horizons, for 2030 and for 2050. And then you can again see on the slide how this was showed in the software. And using this tool within the ClairCity project, we made a little competition among school teams in the participating cities and regions. The software itself was released in English language in spring 2018, and then it was tested in a Hungarian school, and after that it was mirror translated into 5 languages during autumn 2018. It's important that it was mirror translated, so not adapted to national or regional situations. All the teams used the same questions and the same measures in the game. It was used finally in schools in 1 city, in Sosnowiec in Poland, and in 2 regions, Liguria in Italy and in Aveiro region in Portugal. And altogether, 63 teams registered and 55 played through the whole game. And it means altogether 287 children were engaged through this tool within the project. Of course, for us, it was important and interesting to see what kind of measures are supported by the teams and what kind of measures are more or less rejected by the teams and by the future generation itself, let's say. We want to just really quickly show you some of the main highlights from the results. This graph shows all the 30 measures and the percentage of teams that chose a certain measure out of these 30. And as you can see, most of the measures were supported, but there are some which were not that much supported by the teams. These are highlighted with these green red circles on the slide. And just very quickly about these. So as I mentioned, more than 80% of the team supported half of the suggested measures. These were mostly referring to modernization in energy systems related to energy efficiency and modernizing vehicle fleets, buses and cars as well. And of course, the soft measures were also supported, so campaigns and awareness raising. It's also interesting to see which were the measures which were not that much supported by the teams. On the graphs, you could see that 5 measures was disagreed more than 60% of the teams. And these 5s are here, the increase the price of the fossil fuels, or increase road tolls, or reduce speed limit, reduce road capacity, or reduce car size, or even introducing a congestion charging scheme in city centers. We can say based on that that even children, so even the future generation, were not really in favor in these quite restrictive measures, which is an interesting message. On the other hand, there were some measures which divided the teams, meaning 30–50% of the teams disagreed with that. So half-half, let's say. And these were like banning green waste burning, or restrictions on the use of solid fuels for domestic heating, and on tax benefits. But even in these measures and with the others altogether, it's interesting that no big differences among the cities or regions could be identified, although the circumstances in the 3 areas is quite different, related to heating and car use and those aspects. Only in case of 2 measures we could identify the difference among the regions. One was the support related to the accelerated uptake of vehicles running on alternative fuels. This was almost fully supported in Liguria, but less supported in Aveiro, and especially in Sosnowiec. And the other was the compulsory rate of renewable energy sources for domestic heating and electricity. And this was almost fully supported in Aveiro, but less in Liguria and in Sosnowiec. So these are the main highlights. Of course, there are much more interesting results which we could see during the activity. And what I would like still to mention that, as I said, this was an online tool used by the teams. But an offline version of the questionnaire and the measures you could find in the Educator pack, which was developed within the project mainly for educational purposes. And the My City, My School, My Home activity is included in this. And beside the questionnaire and the measures, you can also find very useful materials like lesson plans and everything for engaging the children through such activities within the school. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Peter. As we see from the presentation, we had an online tool challenge older children, 13, 16 ages, but we had very good resources for young people, young children and older, to learn more about air quality, carbon footprint and consequence on public health. A lot of good stuff for teachers. So it was a popular part concerning the age group and also teachers. Let's jump to the star. One of the star success story is a ClairCity Skylines. So I ask Andy King to present.
Thank you, Eva, and hello everyone. I'm excited to talk you through our approach with regards to the game. So the ClairCity game put citizens in charge of running their own city in order to provide researchers with the most popular real-world policy-making measures for each of the partner cities. Game outputs would inform the Delphi process and could be used to shape discussions about real-world policy-making. We considered from a design perspective that the aim was to democratize policy-making by harnessing game mechanics to make the technical policies and the policy-making process more accessible and engaging. The ClairCity Skylines game was a multi-platform game, originally on Android and iOS. We did select Windows builds if we needed to, but we're currently doing work to port this to major web browsers. and I'll touch on that at the end of this short aspect of the presentation. But in the game, you basically took on the role of mayor for your city, and the idea was to navigate around the city, going to different areas and collecting citizens' ideas. By collecting these ideas, this had a short-term, instant effect on the city. But a few years later, or game years later, you could upgrade these ideas into policies and gain more understanding about what the implications for your city would be. And the aim of the game was to achieve a green future in less than 50 years, where the quicker you achieved that, the better the medal that you got. So whilst this provided the most popular policy decisions I've already mentioned, current and ongoing work is the kind of deep dive into the behavioural data that's being captured by this application. Essential innovation of the game was that Game World was being driven by a database of real-world policy measures that were scored by experts from across the wider project. These measures could be good for the climate, they could be business as usual, do nothing, or even bad and make things worse. And the CPL made the following game mechanics possible. So the game uses a form of behavioural triangulation. That's a design phrase. Basically means we need to understand how much players believe or trust in a given policy topic. And we did this by looking across 3 levels. So at the micro level, the idea was for players to navigate areas of the city and select promising ideas. They could reject them or they could accept them. And they'd place them in their briefcase and carry that with them. This had a very short-term instant effect on the attributes in the city. And when they were looking at ideas, they could tell that it might have an impact. So yeah, I just lost my internet connection. I guess these things happen. Yeah, so basically at a macro level, they got a little bit more insight into the changes in the city that might happen, and they also would see how long those policies would last. And they were able to run these policies in parallel as well. So it wasn't just one idea now, it was multiple policies running on their city. And at the meta level, it was about the overall strategy, how quickly they achieved the green future, and the total change of CPL effects. Really sorry for that disconnection now. I'm just glad that it popped back. The second key gameplay feature that the CPL, the database, made possible was the notion of areas and attributes within the game. And this provided scores for these attributes, and depending on the type of player that you were, you could track these scores using the icons in the bottom left of that slide, or you could actually just look at the state of the buildings and the physical area and environmental conditions in the game. So for example, you would win the game by maxing out the environment icon, the green leaf, and that would see a reduction in smog. But if you bankrupted the economy, your bank would be decayed and the pounds, the kind of coin stack would show that it was minimum. So the idea was that there were 2 icons for the city, summarizing the city, and there were 2 icons summarizing the citizen. And this really allowed players to see the impact of their decisions, both instantly and kind of temporarily. And we also managed to get the world being changed audiovisually by these effects as well. So if you had poor citizen health for your city, the citizens would start being ill and wouldn't be happy. Whereas if you had a really strong citizen satisfaction and a good environment, you would see them skipping along in kind of clean air. So that was the aim there. And that gave us the potential to deliver 6 dynamic cities where the available policy ideas, the environmental starting points, the audiovisual assets were all customized for each of the partners' cities and regions. And that helped it kind of foster what we would call in game design an emotional reality. So the players knew that it was a kind of virtual version, and it gave them a greater sense of ownership. So in terms of the headlines from what we call the first phase, there was wider availability for the game, but the primary data capture window, we had hoped to get 1,000 people to play the game, ideally 3 times. And actually we were very lucky to have some sort of very active partners, and we achieved much more than this. So the game had the generation overall of almost 70,000 policies made. We had 2,800 unique users who played the game. I think, don't quote me on this, it was about 2.7 times each. So, you know, it varied a lot by city. And we had a 63-37 male-female ratio. And whilst that maybe doesn't sound as maybe an even split as often reported in the press, the European Software Association says that is the split in male-female gamers. That was a study in 2017. So we weren't far off that. Obviously, it's very difficult to design a game that is suitable for everyone. And in terms of rolls of the dice, if you wanted a very simple analogy for how many times a turn was taken in the game, or how many policies were offered to players, that happened 83,000 times. So this gave us quite a powerful tool for exporting the top policies for a given demographic or a given city. So for example, there, the 16 to 34-year-old demographic, we've got things as broad as transport ticketing types, property developers considering climate, nuclear power, cycle superhighways, and even bonfires. So as you can imagine, there's quite a lot of ongoing work there. So the second phase is starting to look at the game analytics from a game design perspective, and there's a lot of work here, and I appreciate this is more on the kind of social science side of things, but we're trying to understand how different player behaviors changed and the difference in strategies between different types of players, different ages, but also between different cities. And that wasn't a primary function of the original study, but how do Bristol citizens tackle air quality challenges in Sosnovitz? Those sort of things were kind of quite exciting for us to kind of look at. Apologies again for that disconnection. I am at the end. Finally, I'd like to kind of announce that we are doing that browser-based port of the Android game, Android and iOS game, to web browsers. And the aim here is that this is a legacy part of the project where you'll be able to run sort of classroom and workshop kind of activity and generate kind of talking points. The idea, this game, we're not finished yet. It is in beta and it may well break, but it will feature procedurally generated cities from all of the other cities. And by that we mean, because we're going to open this up and give you more choice over what happens, we can't really have people doing this with basically deliberately trashing each of the original 6 cities. So the idea is you can generate random, near infinite combinations, mashups of all the other cities, and then dig into this, customize which categories inside the database are available, and change maybe the difficulty settings and make other things explicit, such as the attributes and icons at the top of the screen. But that brings me to the end of the ClairCity game segment, and I hope it at least gives some insight as to how games can be harnessed to democratize citizen-led policy discussion, because I think what this project has shown us as designers is that games can provide a new language for interacting with citizens. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and it was very impressive, really, and it is impressive. And as you can hear, the work is not finished, so we go on, and we hope many cities, countries will use this game, and outside of Europe as well. So it's really a diamond of the project. I like especially very much. So just pose your questions in the chat room, please, and we go on with the success story. The app is very much used every day. We use them, and the GreenAnt is the ClairCity project app product. So let's hear more from Miriam Frederiksen about that.
Hi, thank you for that, Eva. So another important segment of users that we wanted to engage with in ClairCity is you and me and our social groups and the different communities that we are part of, like, for example, our companies and our workplaces, and to really look more closely into our need for transportation in our daily lives. So we wanted to develop a system that can enable behavioral change of citizens and organizations. We developed a platform that's including a smartphone app that is called GreenAnt. With GreenAnt, you can look at travel patterns. You can compare if travel patterns changes, for example, on specific days. And if there are changes made in the overall infrastructure, you can also see if this had any effect on the travel patterns or travel methods. So it can quantify your own personal emissions, but it can also show the emissions for the whole group of people that is collecting data for one specific geographical area. In addition, it also shows you and the group how you are exposed to air pollutants, and this can tell you the probability of harmful pollutants to one specific route. If you then the next day, for example, choose a different route, you can then later evaluate which route and transport modes that gives you the higher load. So GreenAnt gives you the possibility to look more closely into known problem areas or areas where you maybe want to make some changes. And then you can see if these changes had an effect. And this can benefit both municipalities, politicians, and the service industry. The GreenAnt system is a combination of a smartphone and a web application. You find the smartphone app on App Store and Play Store, and the app is used for collecting data and to looking at your personal contribution to air pollutant, your personal exposure, and your daily, weekly, and monthly activity. The web page is used for registration of these areas and administrating them, and also looking at all collected data for the whole area. In this project, the system has been through several test phases. And one of the challenges that we really have seen is to get enough people to use the smartphone app. As we are always also seeing this day with other apps, that people are really concerned about privacy and security and their ownership of the data. So the approach that we have implemented to address just this is to only allow for really small geographical areas where the app is allowed to collect data about a person's movement. And also the areas can be restricted, so the data collected is only accessible to the one that created this area. And GreenAnt it collects only limited information like a GPS position, a timestamp, and the activity method that is used. And all these data can easily be deleted by the user just directly on the smartphone app. And the user, we are also notifying the user all time when the app is active, and an easy way for the user to stop it. We also see that comprehensive privacy information is really needed to be provided to the user. And in also a really good understanding of who this system can be useful for. So it can span from private and personal clusters with full ownership of their own data, or maybe even to measuring fleet objects like buses, mail trucks, or public rental bikes. There's also a lot of opportunities to combine GreenAnt with additional data sources. So the background information is currently air pollutants, so that gives you the exposure, but the system is not restricted to using only air pollutants. All kinds of geographical information can be added and combined with the travel behavior data that is collected with the GreenAnt system. So that could be everything from maps of places of schools and kindergartens, maybe other institutions, even to avalanche risk areas, typical traffic jam areas, noise, pollen, driving conditions, or places with typically more traffic accidents. So GreenAnt is available for everyone. It can be used worldwide. It's no restrictions in cities, but there is some extra information, such as the exposure information that is available for cities that can provide concentration maps. You can just go ahead and use it. You start with going to the GreenAnt webpage and you create your ANTIL, that's your geographical area. Then you download the smartphone app on your Android or your iPhone device and select your created area, and you start moving around to collect data. Then you can ask more people to collect it together with you. And you get your personal statistics on your phone, and you use the web page to look at the data that you collected together. And you might be a little bit surprised. In the upper right corner here, I've put a picture of data that I collected during a couple of weeks, I think last year, with my diesel car. And as you can see, I really have some room for improvements in my travel behavior. So I will now hand it back to moderator Eva, and thank you.
Thank you very much, Miriam. It was very impressive presentation. It can be used by anybody who would like to learn more about the health effect of the environment, air pollution and climate change. So it's a personalized way of learning about the environment, but also learning about what we do affect our health and other health as well. Very interesting time now, closing almost the webinar, but going to a very important topic, how to use and adapt the resources. And I asked Laura to present. A lot of people posed questions about how to use them, the resources, the different tools which were presented. So please explain. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ava. So yes, we've all had a glimpse now into the engagement tools and their evaluation, what works. So we just wanted to summarise what worked well for us and where we think there's room for improvement for other people taking them on and continuing to use them. So firstly, the Delphi method, as I say, really is traditional surveys and traditional workshops. Not to explain those as a method because they're so well used, and that's for a reason, and that's because they work. This is the method in which we engage the most people. Our evaluation shows as a result many participants are considering changing their behaviour, so they are impactful methods of engagement. However, as discussed, as practitioners, we have to make sure that we're not just engaging the already engaged, the usual suspects. And so, as I mentioned in the questions, you have to improve representation by working harder. So going to different areas of the city that you actually want to target and reach, perhaps converting online into physical when we're allowed to post-COVID-19, and making sure the workshops are held out of kind of main city areas in collaboration with community organisations and groups. So moving on to city events, we'd also recommend part of kind of building the relationships and trust with different communities in your cities is about being seen, so being there and having a reputation, a good reputation and a record. And city events really help with that because they raise awareness of these issues and about yourself, your group as well. So we've developed a guide to events which you can download, and that's where we discuss activities which can get the public's attention, how to extend this through fact sheets. So we've talked a lot about facts on air pollution and climate change as well, and also about social media to extend that reach online. Again, it's really important to think about representativity, so both the people who are at your event, so your ambassadors, and also the areas of the city in which you're attending, making sure that you're attending intrinsic events within the community, so events that would happen anyway and aren't necessarily just air pollution or climate change focused. So Skylines, the game that you've seen, it was a fantastic way to reach large volumes of people and different people to those who usually engage with air pollution. You'll have seen it's a very young audience who said that they had no knowledge or very little knowledge of air pollution, so not the usual suspects we normally work with. And adapt further, we'd say you need to think more detail about how to develop games with non-gamers, so people who don't normally play games, perhaps women or perhaps older participants like commuters as well. And that's why, as Andy mentioned, we've now got a light version of Skylines, so a kind of a short game where we can weigh up these things like costs, impact, city reach and so on, and the results show there and then to prompt discussion between participants. The GreenAnt app is still in development. It's a great concept that we want to work on further. As many other apps are finding, as Miriam said, it's data security and perceptions of risk. So I saw a question saying, does the app track your movements? Yes, it does. But as Miriam said, it takes a while to update so that there's no safety issues there. In other words, you can't see where you are at that moment. But it's great personal learning as well, because you can see whereabouts you're moving and what we need to think about. And they're all further factors that we'll be taking on board and thinking about developing in future projects as well. And we'd be interested if anyone else is interested in working further with that. We're keen to hear as well. So community films, they were our way of reaching older people who are disproportionately affected by air pollution. So they provided a great way to hear the voices of older people in our partner cities. We found the best way to improve participation was to work again with partner organisations who are already working with older people. So they helped with recording or uploading films, so those digital skills that older people might not necessarily have. And other ideas might be pairing with younger people who understand digital filming and editing. However, I think it's really important that we keep thinking of ways to engage older people in these projects, because across Europe, they are the largest demographic, but they don't necessarily understand and won't necessarily feel the impacts of climate change for our society. So really important to raise awareness there. Another of the demographics most affected by air pollution are young children. So our schools activities are, I saw lots in the comments about people wanting to take these forward. So the schools competition that we should is really a good way to kind of engage with those children and to get them to think about the scenarios, the different ways that our behaviour can impact the city as a whole. And we've expanded that digital competition into an offline version, which is now available in our schools pack. There's also homeschooling lessons on there, very relevant for our COVID-19 situation. And we've also got links to the British Science Association to take those forward. And finally, our evaluation showed major impacts, not just for citizens, but for the people working on this project, so our scientists and science communicators, and for policymakers working in the cities and regions as well. So working with citizens to design our future cities can not only benefits us all, but it's more likely to make change happen. This summary you can see here is available in our visual evaluation pack. So all the data that we've listed today are a part of our reports. They will be available, they're available on our website. We will send them out by email afterwards as well. And there you'll also find all our graphic packs, so with lots of lovely infographics and images to show the work we've done and tools for further people to take forward as well. So with that, I'll hand over to Eva for our final questions.
Thank you very much. It's very important to discuss how to use the resources. As you say, the process is important. It's not like a book on the bookshelf and you can buy. You need people, you need concept. There is a tool that we developed in the ClairCity, but you need citizens and stakeholders to work with and work on the future of the city or the region. So the process is important and it takes time, you know. Many questions, the time is running, but I will put on a few. So it's important to understand really what will happen after the project. Will we collect data about how the tools were used and what is the effect of the policy package? It is the first important question. The second question is about the school children and the hard work. They worked with the measures, and these measures, some of them were also in the game. So, to Peter, how was the work for the children in the school and for the teachers? Was it difficult or not? And another question to Andy about the age range using the game. Probably young people can enjoy also the ClairCity game. So just now for these few questions, and I ask you to reply. So probably Peter can start.
Yes, thanks, Eva, and thanks for the questions. Well, from the feedbacks, we could see that let's say the organization of the game, so getting the teams and then running the competition was a more or less a big work for the teacher. But and also if for the background documents and giving the background knowledge to the children, it was more a work for the teacher. From the children and from the teams, we see that they more or less went through the game. So as I mentioned, from the 63 registered teams, 55 went through quite easily through the questions and through the measures. For the questions, as I mentioned, we've tested and we've run several times tests within the consortium as well. So starting from 160 something questions, we drop it down to 38 at the end. So we tried to simplify the questionnaire because, as I mentioned, it was more about to engage the children and to get them thinking, not to really collect scientific data and to really make scientific results out of that. And as I saw in the questions now, several are referring to what we said about the background, the scoring system, and so on to the children. So basically, the scoring system went in the background of the software, so the children didn't see the potential impacts of the measures when they were choosing that. What we had there is a description, a short pop-up description to all the measures, in which we mentioned that what kind of impact it could have. And also we showed if there were any problematic, so if it can be very unpopular or it can be popular, and sometimes we refer to cost, because I saw that also in a question, but originally it was an idea to somehow include the cost of the measures in the school activity, but then we dropped it because we didn't find it very useful in that sense. But as you heard in the game, it was an aspect. Yeah, I think that's it. Thanks.
Okay, thank you very much. So, Andy, can you refer to the question I posed related to age group using the game?
Yeah, of course, Ava. So basically, when you started the game, you would get a very short kind of a profile screen where you would enter the demographic data, or you could opt out from certain things. And it was possible to play the game if you were younger than 13 to 15, for example, but the data wasn't collected. So the stats that we have range across the 13 to 15, 16 to 24, 25 to 34. I think the other two options were 35, 49, 50 to 64, and then 65 plus. And broadly speaking, we had 13 to 15-year-olds was about 13% of overall players. 16 to 24 age range was 31% of players. 25 to 34 was 27, 20, almost 28%. So that's why the kind of 16 to 34 age was the stat that we kind of highlighted in the game bit, because that's the largest. But it's worth saying 35 to 49 age range, 21% of the players. So it's still being played by people outside the kind of target demographic of what people might call gamers. And in the 50 to 64 and 65 plus, I think it was about 7% of plays overall. I think one thing just to touch on was quite interesting to see that obviously the mechanisms for engaging the city citizens were different, but across each of the 6 regions and cities. But the profile of age groups did change. So, for example, Viro had the highest number of 16 to 24-year-olds, whereas Amsterdam had a very flat kind of distribution across the 25 to 50-year-old, the same levels of engagement. So, yeah, there's some interesting stuff there. I don't know if that answers the question, but yeah, it was open to all, but only captured for some of the demographics.
Okay, thank you very much. Yeah, so youngers use more the game, and let's see in the future, but probably it is about past. I would like to ask Laura to turn to the question about the data. Will we collect data about the use of the different tools in the future? And anything else you would like to add, please?
Yeah, so as we say, we've moved the game, which needs our amazing game developers to work from a phone app onto an online version, and that produces the results there and then. So the idea is it could be used in a discussion session to get the chat started, so you will see the results. Similarly, while all these tools are available, we want them to be shared, we want them to be used across the world. Our time on the project is coming to an end, so we will not be able to analyse this data further. However, because this is our job, I'm a professional researcher at UE Bristol, we will be going on to other projects and keeping involved within our partner cities that we're paired with. So for me, it's Bristol, but we have our partner cities and buddies right across Europe. So it's about moving on to other projects, keeping those resources and data with us so that we can keep the pressure on for raising awareness of air pollution and carbon emissions, and hopefully making a change as well.
Much for the further explanation. We could continue the discussion of the questions for a while, but the time is limited. So let's see the coming days. Everybody is very much interested in learning more about data and how data was analyzed. So on 18th June, the ClairCity modeling program I mean, the webinar will come, please register. And a lot of questions related to policy package and also following that, how is it possible to know the proposed measures and policies were used or not, or have to be created new ones. So 25th June give you the opportunity to learn more about the lessons for policy, how to involve citizens and create conditions to working on policy measures. So it's very interesting topic, and you see the link to different websites, and you can write emails and you can use the resources. So on the web surface, ClairCity is really very rich and represented. And finally, just to tell again who are behind this huge cities region. So you could learn Amsterdam, Bristol, Sosnowiec, Ljubljana, and Liguria, and very important work by Aveiro University. So Aveiro regions, you can ask what was different in regions and cities. You can learn from the project report as well, but without a very high level interested research, it cannot happen. Of course, the first for the coordinator, Trinomics, Netherlands, and the Studies University of West of England, Bristol, the research coordinator is still going on from there because we will finish in July the project. And you see other institutes from the Netherlands, Denmark, Norway, Air Quality, and also international organization, former Regional Environmental Center, and Italian organization, Tecne, and Transport Mobility Leuven, and the University of Aveiro I mentioned. So people, high level in research, but also going towards policy making also. And we can learn a lot about policy making and research, the connection between researchers, but social science is very important here, where we put citizens and stakeholders in the middle and work with them. So it's a uniqueness of the ClairCity project. We hope you enjoy the webinar, the presentations. From the questions, we understand that you are very interested. So go to the next webinars and keep the connection with us in the future. And we hope in Europe, in other cities, region, and beyond Europe, the outcome of the ClairCity will be used. So thank you for all of you for participation, especially for speakers, very, very good presentations. And come back to us during June when we have the next webinars. So now we are closing the webinar, the first webinar of the ClairCity project, and thank you again.